The Left Wing Podcast in association with Land Rover. Whether you're headed to a match or a weekend away, there's plenty of space for your team and their gear in the new Discovery Sport.
They were O'Driscoll, Morgan, extra man is Fitzgerald. Oh, Fitzgerald is cutting back inside! Leinster have another! Darcy, O'Driscoll through the legs, Rob Carney, out to Fitzgerald again, step and score! Number 2 for him!
Hello and welcome to the Left Wing Independent.ie's rugby podcast in association with Land Rover. I'm Will Slattery, delighted to be joined in studio as always by Luke Fitzgerald. Luke, hello.
Will, how are you?
I'm good. A lot to talk about after that weekend. I'm delighted to be joined in studio as well by Neil Francis to go through it all. Neil, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks, Will.
And reading your article after the game, you said it was probably the most comprehensive 12-point hammering you've seen in quite a while. What is your kind of, after maybe another day to reflect on it, what is the most concerning aspect for you after that defeat to England?
Outthought again. You know, I'd forget about the August game, and you go back to the Aviva, so February in the Aviva, and audacious, like they played with real audacity. So if you remember the first, I think it was Johnny May who scored the first try, and throw over the back of the line out to Tuilagi, and the skip pan, they just caught us cold. Like Ireland just weren't expecting that, and tactically, just way ahead of us. I don't think Ireland were mentally up for that game at all. You know, you can say you know on the Wednesday whether you're going to play or not. And Ireland, I just couldn't believe how there are certain things that you do, you know, that tell you that you can stay in a game, and Ireland just didn't do that. So you're tackling, even in contact, we were. You know, you only let yourself be bullied if you just put the hands up. So 2 fellas on one path, and then the rest of them, you know. So I thought Ryan,
What a player, yeah.
was, you know, and so what's his mindset where he's sort of saying, okay, I'm clearing out. So there were 6 or 7 clear outs where you could hear the crowd, and he was close to being pinged. They were so aggressive. So he's on one wavelength. Stander not far behind him. At least he got stuck in, and then the other 6 off the map in terms of what was required. So I think not up for it, first of all, which was very, very disappointing. There are certain things: tackling, clearing out, making your tackles, even kind of scrummaging, and just off the pace in terms of doing that. So you know if Ireland are up for it, because they can. There are certain things you can. You know, if you're outthought, fair enough. If you're outplayed, fair enough. But in terms of the physical stakes, if you don't confront England at Twickenham from the very off, you're going to be well beaten. And the only thing that surprised me, 24-12. I mean, it could have been. I saw Matt Dawson, you know, sort of talking about 30-point margin. I don't like Matt, but I couldn't disagree with him on this. It could have been 30 if England had been a little bit luckier, and if they'd kept the foot on the accelerator.
And you know, if you to Neil's point about the physical dominance England had, or how Ireland struggled to contain them in that regard, like, you know, this is an England team missing Mako and Billy Vunipola, 2 guys who in the fixtures between the sides have been extremely important for England. So they didn't have either of those guys, and yet, as Johnny Sexton himself said after the game, at times it was like a rerun of that game in the Aviva last year in terms of just how, you know, comprehensively Ireland were outplayed. Like, were you surprised about how the game unfolded in that regard?
Not particularly. I kind of said it last week, really. I thought it would be tighter because I just thought Ireland would show up, but I didn't think they did. You know, and probably compounded by some basic errors. Like, you really have to be, when you're under that much pressure, you know, look, usually you do end up making a few of those kind of errors, but if you can hang on and not make them, you know, they could have still been in the game. And maybe when they got that little bit of, I suppose, that period in the second half where they, you know, got a few points on the board, things could look a lot different. Or if they, you know, got the kicks, you know, things could have looked a lot different. But I really think the key for Ireland or for any team, is like in rugby, it's going to be the physical battle, and they lost that fairly comprehensively. And I think against England, and you saw New Zealand struggle with it as well in the World Cup. If in those tight areas around the ruck, kind of from 1 to 4 defenders, from their first to the fourth defender, if you're not creative around there, you'll just get punished. You just get really, really punished. So you have to be brave and take a few chances. If you're just going one-out runners from Conor Murray all day, if there's any kind of slow up to the ball, to the receiver getting the ball, you're just going to get smashed backwards. And I thought that was exactly what happened in the Aviva. I thought that was exactly what happened in Twickenham. Consequently, every single decision that Ireland had to make from their, particularly their two playmakers who are going to probably get lambasted this week, every single decision was, they had a half a second or a second less, and they were under pressure making every single one of them. So I think they need to find some way of figuring out what you do to counteract this. Leinster really struggled, I thought, against Saracens with it as well. There's an awful lot of similarities. And what you do against that, I'm not 100% sure. I know I think the kicking strategy against them, and it was very evident last year in the Aviva, that's defunct against them now. They figured that out. You need to figure out, other places to go. I thought it was fairly telling that the 2 tries that England got at the start were kind of off, chips, which I think is interesting because both defences are employing a similar strategy, albeit England are doing it better. But that's, I thought that was interesting. Do you, I suppose the drawback in that is that, if it doesn't go well, you're giving them the ball back. But they need to think about something there. I think when you're exiting, the high ball from 9, it's just not working. Those box kicks are not working against them. They figured that out. They're just blocking all the runners, and they end up getting an easy take. I think that crossfield Gary Owen is something that we need to really explore, or even just going up the middle and chasing with the guys who have a little bit more space, and maybe you get a few more runners to attack them there. And I thought defensively as well, it wasn't really mentioned, but I thought they really took us out in the tight exchanges. We never really knocked them back in there. So I think the biggest mistake that Eddie Jones makes is picking Ford and Farrell. I think that's the biggest mistake he can make. Now, you can argue about Slade being injured, but he was back for this game. Their best pairing is definitely Farrell, Tuilagi and Slade, 100% in my mind. But they get made to look like heroes if you don't stop the momentum in the tight exchanges, which Ireland didn't do. So if you don't do that, they get time on the ball, and then they get to bring all their dangerous runners, and they get Tuilagi on the front foot, they get Johnny May going out the back, they get Elliot Daly. All these guys look like superheroes, and that looks like a really good decision. Whereas against the big teams, and South Africa showed it up, it's not their best combination. It is not their best combination out there. So there are a few areas. Well, I know I'm droning on a bit, but it was frustrating watching it, and I've been waiting a while to get that off my chest, to be honest.
Just on the physical aspect of it, Neil, because if you look through the weights of both teams, it was identical in terms of the across from 1 to 15. If you added it up, it was identical. So, on that sense, why should Ireland be getting bullied, as you say? And if you look back to some of the other fixtures, I know there's been a few new faces brought in for England, but in 2017 and 2018 Ireland won both games in the Six Nations. There was no accusations those days that they should be physically outmuscled to this extent. What's changed in that regard? Because it's not as if the Irish team are small men and across the board. There's some big guys in that pack as well. Why is it when they come up against England in the last year or so that they've just gotten completely blown away?
Just top 4. That's it. They're all as fit as each other. I'm sure they're benching in the gym exactly the same amount of weights. Everything would be. It's just your mental approach and your mindset, and that's the difference. And selection, did Jones get a selection right? Of course he did, because he won. He could have picked another 15, and because the force was with them, and because Ireland weren't up for it. So he's a smarter coach, and that's the problem. Now, he caught Joe once, but I just think getting out thought, and I think he was clever. I mean, he has us, as Luke was saying, he has us sussed, right? So we gotta rethink, and I think that's a problem. If I was a player now, and you'd sort of say, what would I prefer? A strong personality as coach or a smart guy as a coach? I'd go for smart, and I don't think we have him. I don't think Andy Farrell is a particularly smart coach, and his ability to think on the hoof and to figure things out at half time and to have the correct approach to how to beat England. And I think Jones, like just simple things. That guy Furbank is a dreadful player. And I watched him play for Northampton, and he's quick and he's good hands and he looks good. But he was dreadful against France and he was dreadful against Scotland, and he just said, okay, the Irish have a chance here. That's a weak point. So move Daly back. Didn't have to. And he said he's not quite right. He wasn't not quite right. They just didn't pick him, and he was dropped. So I think they've got it right. One of the reasons why you can see why they pick Ford. Now, Ford at this stage is a very good standard international player. He has his weaknesses, but they haven't been found. They were found out in the World Cup final, but that's at the very, very highest level. So their kicking was just so good, and the two kicks from Youngs and the kick from Ford. Whenever we try a dink or a little grubber along the ground, it always seems to be a lateral kick right in front of us, or a little to the right. This was a diagonal, so caught your winger who was up on the line, and it caught your full back. And I thought Larmour was just a little out of position, not hugely. And 9 times out of 10, you just kick the ball dead or whatever else. But the kick was very, very good. And sometimes the very worst that could happen would be you carry it over and you have a 5-yard scrum, and England are knocking on the door again there. So they used that ball very, very well. And he just got his selection right. And I just like the way they work Ford and the way they work Farrell. Farrell's, I don't think, is playing particularly well at the moment, but because they're on the front foot the whole time, it's a real advantage to have. And I just quite surprised that they lost to France, because they're the best side in the competition.
And in terms of an Irish perspective as well, obviously the half-back pairing of Conor Murray and Johnny Sexton are coming under a bit of pressure, or in for a bit of criticism after last weekend. As you say, when your pack is being beaten like that, you are at a huge disadvantage. But they didn't play well, notwithstanding that. What did you make of their display? I know Johnny Sexton had a very uncharacteristic off day from the kicking tee. Like those kicks, even looking at them, looked,
Yeah, look, I certainly don't profess to be any kind of expert when it comes to kicking, but I tell you what, I am an expert. Well, as far as a player goes, certainly not a doctor, but pretty much, I'd like to think I know my strapping around my knees pretty well. It looks to me like it's. Now, sorry, I honestly, I'm purely speculating here. Just from what I'm looking at on his knee, that looks like a medial. The same strapping you get when you have a medial tear. I noticed it last week against Wales as well, like very heavily strapped as well. It's the only thing that really, because when you have a medial tear, the bottom half of your leg, it almost feel like it's trailing behind. It'd be really hard to kick with, and place kick, I'd say, it'd be extremely hard to kick with as well. I'm not making excuses for him, because I'm actually, as I said, I haven't talked to him or anything like that. But that looks like that's what that is to me, and I'd be very surprised, if that didn't affect him somewhere, in his kicking game, which it clearly has. Two very uncharacteristic kicks. I always think he nearly gets better with the pressure when he's kicking. And he had a bad one last week as well. He kind of a funny one last week as well. Or 2 weeks ago, excuse me. So, look, leaving that aside, only speculating on that, but that's what the strapping definitely looks like. I didn't think they helped the pack out either. I thought it was probably a bit premature for everyone to be talking about, the guys, how well the team played last week. I did say this was going to be a key game to see how far they'd come, or if the new coaching staff had any impact. And I still see lots of similarities. I just don't see much of a change in the game plan. There was talk of it. I saw them play one slightly different kind of set play that didn't come off. But other than that, I just don't see much change. I don't see anyone trying to, like any kind of creativity in that area. Like everyone knows that Ireland are going to be playing off Conor Murray, and if Johnny Sexton's down, it's definitely off Conor Murray. If Conor Murray's down, they're going to pick and go. I just don't see anyone trying anything new or creative in there. Now, maybe someone will say to me, well, what else would you try in there? I don't know exactly, but I know they need to try something. It can't be the same picture over and over again. When you see Manu Tuilagi after the match saying, yeah, we knew if we shut them down at off 9, that was, that could be the game. That was obviously a key point. And he was talking about the hits they were putting, and he was right. They absolutely marginalised us in those areas. Someone needs to figure out and grab the game by the scruff of the neck and try something new. Try and give your forwards some kind of platform to get them into the game, because you could see they were really struggling. When I was looking at it, I was thinking, you know, who on the touch side has said, right lads, this isn't working. Like, this is not working. We need to try something different. I didn't see anything. I didn't see them trying to attempt anything new. Stuck to the game plan and just kept getting smashed back. Like, what I'd be proposing, even for a period, no matter where you're on the pitch, just pick and go. Just pick and go. Like, just hang on to the ball. Just don't deny them possession. Try and get a penalty. Try and get something in the game. Try and get somewhere in the game where you go, right, well, let's try something different now. You know, because otherwise you're stuck in a rut where, you know, you got no momentum for the whole thing. Your halfbacks are clearly not playing well. Your pack are struggling to get a hold in the game and get a foothold. You need to do something. You need to have the ball. I don't know what you think, Neil.
They weren't helped on a lot of things there. Like, so you're what you're trying to do is get your pack going forward. So Murray had about 5 kicks, either box kicks or clearance. Now there was a little bit of a breeze. In the first half.
Difficult,
and they were dreadful kicks. I mean, I haven't seen as bad kicks from sort of Murray. So say if you'd maxed out on those and they were the best kicks that you could have got, and instead of going 15 metres further, like one of his clearance only went 10 yards. And it's box kicks, just, you know, it's just they're turnovers. That's all they are. So if they had worked, you know, and he had his kicking game was on song, you know, that gets you in the game.
This is kind of touch as well. I look at that and I think, even if they were really good, well, we've got the ball back. I think maybe 2 years ago we probably would have got the ball back. I feel like now people have kind of figured us out. Like, I was looking at it, you know, when you watch Connacht in really extreme conditions down the sports ground, and they are, I'm not saying that they've got it figured out, but they adapt really well to the conditions. If they're playing up the hill, into the wind, they just start picking the ball. They just start picking and going. 5 minutes from their own line. I'm not suggesting that you do that for the whole game, but for a period of 10 minutes, it's just like, we're just going to deny the ball. They're going to get frustrated. You might give away a penalty. We're just going to be really accurate for 10. You can't really mess that up. You know what I mean? It's hard to mess that up. Well, I'd be suggesting something like that when the kicking game is clearly off. Something, or even take pressure off Murray, where you say, we're not going to give you, like, some of those kicks, like, there were 15-metre channels and he looked like he was going for touch, or going, like, you want to try and get as close to the touchline as possible. That is unbelievably difficult, to try and kick that ball pretty much over your shoulder. I've seen Murray do it, but not when we're under that much pressure, you know, and not when you're clearing in kind of swirly conditions. I thought the ask from him, when a guy who's kind of probably feeling the pressure a little bit as well, was way too much. Like something like Johnny Sexton, maybe a crossfield Gary Owen. You need to try something different, is what I'm saying. And I'm just wondering, has someone really sat down and considered this? Because there's been a few occasions when Ireland have really struggled against this England team, and it'd be worrying. I thought they struggled against Wales last year in the Millennium. That pace off the line, being really physical, you know, when those, you know, first 4 or 5 defenders are up hard off the line, we seem to really struggle, because all we do is either head back in towards the ruck, or we're getting smashed backwards. And I just don't see, like, you know, I don't see any other way of dealing with this, particularly if the referees are not, and they're not going to do it, are not going to referee the offside line. They're just not going to do it.
There's no option for you. There's one of the great scenes from When We Were Kings, as Norman Mailer was analysing Ali and Foreman. And one of the things he spotted was that Ali was leading with his right. And he caught Foreman 4 or 5 times in the first. And it enraged Foreman. Like, and not only did it enrage him, but it surprised him, because Ali had he left himself wide open, because normally you lead with your left.
It's an insult to a professional boxer.
It's an insult to a professional boxer. Your father might have told you. Anyway, and I thought it was an insult what England did to Ireland at the breakdown, because quite often you just see it. There was one English player on the ruck. You know, and every time, and a lot of time they just got out of the ruck, and that's an insult, I think, to a certain degree. So what did they do? And you could see them fan back when the kick was signalled, or they were all across the line, and they could get 4. They had a kind of a Ledley King holding pattern. Sometimes either Farrell or Ford were in the midfield, and then you had your back 3 in the backfield. So you couldn't do anything. You couldn't kick effectively. The kick would have to be absolutely brilliant. So who's leading the pack? And you just sort of say, and this is something you can't just start it in the middle of a test match in Twickenham, because it's a hard place to operate. So nobody in the ruck.
Just picking.
Yeah, but it's not it would have to be a little bit more simple now than, or a little bit more complex than a pick and drive. And I've seen some teams try and set up mauls in general play, and then try and bring in forwards, and if they don't, if all the forwards were fanned out, don't come in, well then you kind of burst through. And it's something you've got to do where the forwards have got to do even a triangle, or else just pick the ball and kind of go over the top and try and offload it to guys. And it's something you have to practice. Now Joe is gone. It's offload city. I mean, you won't be put into the naughty corner for trying an offload. But if you don't kind of practice it, so England had one player, maybe two, in the ruck all day long, and if all your options, if you're not kicking well, and all your options, so once you line bust, and particularly through the ruck, you're in trouble. And if you can get your forwards and your runners onto that, and you're clever, and you don't go to ground with the first tackle, you stand tall and you take it. And it's amazing how little original thought there is, because all we do is we ape New Zealand, except we're 3 or 4 years behind them. So this might be original thought from Eddie. Now I thought Pivac. I thought Wales were a little unlucky against Ireland, and I thought some of the things they were doing. If you remember Thomas Williams' try, where they got Alan Wynne-Jones.
Oh, it was lovely. Yeah, the little ball back inside after.
Ball back, but it was an offload. So how do you use your big men? I despair every time I see Devon Toner taking the ball on. I mean, it's a collapse, and he makes the yard, maybe kind of less there. And it's a bad use of your big men. So your big men should be standing tall, particularly in midfield. If you place them out in midfield, and I think it's good thinking that you place them out in midfield, and instead of actually just bending at a 90-degree angle and going to ground, using their power against a smaller centre and offloading. It was an offload back inside. And it's a line bust, and look what happened. They scored, and you got to do it either further closer into the ruck, or you got to do it out in midfield and place your men there. But I don't think we have. It's one of the problems with Murray, whether he can or he can't do it, that Luke McGrath can certainly do it. A little snipe around the thing there, and he's clever enough to feed his back row or feed any of his pack just around the side. He does it for Leinster. Now there's less space. There's less in a test of that match. You take it around the side, and sometimes you just get snotted. And that's why, if there's nobody in the ruck, that's where and nobody thinking on the hoof.
Well, I would suggest that something needs to come in from the touchline. I would say that's where your coaches come in and say, listen, lads, we're really struggling here. So we're going to have just 10 minutes where we're going to play the most boring rugby of all time, but we're going to hang on to the ball. And we're gonna try and eke out penalties, or we're gonna be really accurate at ruck time. We're just gonna pick and go. We're gonna pick and go in with two guys into one or two. We're gonna hang in around that ruck, because they're fanning out. They're not competing there. They're just gonna come off the line and smash us backwards. Our playmakers have no chance against that. And I do agree. I think when you listen to that, it's very interesting to hear the thought around Alan Wynne-Jones, because New Zealand have been doing this for a very long time with Brodie Retallick. They just leave him in the middle of the pitch. Now I'd say someone like Dev Toner or James Ryan actually they're brilliant handlers of the ball. Even Ian Henderson is a lovely runner with the football as well. So there could be something there, but something needs to happen, because they need to figure out a way to get around this kind of defence. And I think Leinster are in the same boat. If they come up against Saracens, I really believe it. I thought last year they looked like they had no other. Nothing else changed in the middle of the game, even when they were struggling. I thought Saracens beat Leinster, very, very well last year in that final. It was interesting to hear all the Leinster guys. They think it was really tight.
I think it was too. I disagree with you.
I think they got absolutely smashed in the tight exchanges, and they were going backwards all day. They lost all the physical battles. I think people will talk about one pass to Gary Ringrose. I thought Saracens could have got 2 or 3 other tries in that match fairly easily. I thought there was a golfing class last year, which is interesting. Yeah, I mean, you obviously saw it differently to me.
No, I think what people, because there was a general air of dismay with the last 20 minutes. You know, so the game was
telling though.
The game was won. So whatever they did, you know, the memory is that, you know, whatever Leinster were trying to do, they were playing catch up and they couldn't, and you just get closed down. And it is a game of chess. Like once you get ahead, you know, you can defend. So I would say if Leinster had converted some of their tries or their opportunities, that if they had to defend and deny Saracens, they could have done exactly the same and just strangled them.
Yeah, I just saw it very differently. I thought like Leinster had one real opportunity, and I thought they made one mistake from a clearance kick before half time. I thought Saracens had all the moments, and I thought the same. Look, and sorry, I know we're talking about a game last year, but it is interesting because that's on the horizon. I think they're playing very similarly, and I think if you think about it, a game is like, would you rather have all the 90% of the moments or 10% of the moments? I would say that the team who has 90% of the dominant moments in the game, well, even if they don't convert on the day, they should win on 90% of the time, you know. And I thought the English match against Ireland on the weekend was very much that. I thought there was a 12-point difference, but England had all of the moments, like all of the play.
Well, one of the things you've got, I mean, and I think it's a sad reflection on the game that, you know, at the very highest level, that it's down to physical strength and power and physical fitness. And I thought our back row were outclassed and outmuscled on a lot of fronts. And I think Van der Fleer is a decent player, but he's not England and Twickenham. And he did well against New Zealand, but that's a different type of game because the Kiwis don't play that kind of power game. So the French will do. I mean, their back row are pretty good, and the 2 Saffers they have in their pack, they're playing well at the moment.
It's the United Nations over there.
Yeah.
In terms of personnel, then for the rest of the campaign, like who would you change, bring in, or is there anyone in particular you think would make a big impact?
Yeah, I think he was sitting here a couple of weeks ago. I think he's just been very, very unlucky. I think Rhys Ruddock is a guy, you know. So you're looking at what you're playing against, and you're just saying, okay, we got to get across the gain line, and we got to present power. And I think for a guy who's 19 and a half stone and 6'3", and he just does it week in, week out. And every time he seems to be in a position to get into the side and consolidate as he gets injured or something happens. And so somebody like him, I'm not sure. I haven't seen enough of Will Connors, and it's hard to gauge with Caelan Doris because the complexion of the match changed, and coming on the last 20 minutes, England were. I thought when he said, we could have declared at half time, and he shouldn't have apologised. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why. Did somebody draw? I don't think he did. I think he just apologised on his own behalf. So, game over, and everybody knew that. But I thought Doris did offer a little bit of kind of aggression when he came on. He carried very well. So you're going to have to change the back row, and you're going to have to play them. I don't think the Italy game is going to go ahead, so that's unfortunate. So you're going to have to change the composition of your back row, and it's one of the things. It always happens. Somebody gets picked, somebody gets injured, and then the old guys who were sort of saying, "Okay, you're gone." So I think O'Mahony was, on the bench for most of the. If even out of the 23, comes back in, decent performance against Wales, and then really not at the races because he doesn't have the power to carry. He does his line out stuff and he makes his tackles, but that's it. So you need a Ireland really miss Sean O'Brien, Hard to know whether he would have made a difference, like individuals, but certainly Sean O'Brien, if he'd been playing, I think that would have made a significant difference. And I think Rhys Ruddock, and then you gotta decide, the composition of your back row, because it'll be a different game to Twickenham. It will be a very difficult game to the Paris game, and it'll be a much faster game. Like those guys, I was very surprised. I watched 3 or 4 times Aldreath running. Jesus, he's as fast as some of their backs there. I remember, and they hang him out in the backfield and they just give it to him, and then suddenly he trots up, and then suddenly he's gears. I mean, he is really quick, that guy. So their back row is very good, very dynamic. So what do we do? Do we pick a power back row that we should have picked against England, or do we pick a loose enough back row? Because that'll be a loose game. I mean, I've played in Twickenham when we got hidings, and I've played in Paris when we've got hidings, and they're going to throw the ball around against us. I mean, that's
Yeah. That defence will be interesting though, because it'll be very similar, Sean Edwards-esque, just all guns blazing. They're just going to try and smash you backwards, and that's been the point of difference for them, really. They had lots of quality. I think going forward, it was defensively they were really, really loose. He looks like he's tightened them up a bit. It's harder to score against them, but in the tight exchanges, that's where it's going to be won and lost again. And they've got some huge men in there as well, like very, very physical. And as Neil said, some serious athletes all through the pitch. So, they need to figure something out there.
The other thing with the French, and might have escaped people, penalty count, well down in single figures. So not only has Edwards come in and tightened them up defensively, and the French have always been defensively, have been very good.
You have to get them up for it, though.
Yeah.
If they're up for it.
But just the change in mindset. Don't give away penalties. Don't give away penalties. And they've been very, very disciplined. And they've kept going. And they nearly gave it away against England. I mean, there were, another 10 minutes that game would have.
Yeah, but there was signs when they creaked that there was some of the old, like you're not going to ever get it completely out of them.
No,
they saw that game out pretty well in Cardiff at the weekend.
I thought they did. Sorry, I thought they did. But they just had. There's more like if you get under their skin, if you can get a bit of momentum like Wales got at certain periods in the game, if you are brave, I think they're a bigger challenge than they were, but they're still, you can still beat them. You know, if we're coming down to that and we need to win it, we can do that. We just need to find out ways into the game and be able to hang on to it and give our guys momentum. If we can't give them any momentum, we'll look very similar to how we looked in the weekend. Like that's what happens. That's how bad you can look if the pressure's on you for 80 minutes, and you're not getting any go for it. It's a simple game. It doesn't get really that complex, but it requires some thought as to how you go and get the thing that's most important, which is the momentum. It's very important that you do that. Otherwise, everything you do is under pressure.
How impressed have you been with France? Do you think this is this really them back finally at the top table? They're probably going to be going for a Grand Slam in Paris if they see off Scotland. This is the first time since 2010 they've actually legitimately contended for a Six Nations, so a full decade. Is it real, do you think?
Yeah, I think I played against Fabian, and you'd see him in the press room, so he was doing a lot of media stuff, and it's just something that it's very hard to reconcile. You go to the dark side, and you have the fourth estate, and you lose whatever. The way, if you finish your career, and you might take 2 or 3 years out, and then suddenly, I want to be a coach. I'll be a specialist coach, and then you make your way up there. And he did very well, I think, for Stade Francais, and he did very well, reasonably well for Montpellier. And then I think he had a row with Mohamed Altrad, and then he's back in, and you see him in the press box, and he's too handsome to be a coach.
There are some pretty high fashion glasses.
Yeah, they were. So I have to reckon. The first thing he did. I mean, why didn't we pick up Sean Edwards? That's the first thing. And they would have known each other. And Ibanez, not sure about him either. I think you could talk to Ian Madigan about. I think Ibanez was.
Ibanez, I think it actually went well with Ibanez when he came in at the end. There was a coach before. I think Brunel. There was a falling out, but Ibanez actually apparently went very well. He actually liked him a lot, and he's got very good English. I think Ibanez from his time with Wasps. Yeah, so
and he's a good fella.
Yeah, seems to be a good guy. Yeah,
he's a good fella. So, I think the overall kind of strategy and always dancing in behind. There's Laporte there. You might sort of think, he's far, far away, but he's not, and he's masterminding everything. And I've met him once, and that's it. But I think he's a little bit mad, but he gets everything done. Like when he coached France, they were very, very competitive, and a lot of people question his methods, but they worked. And I think he is kind of looking after Galtier at the moment, just a little bit behind the scenes, and I think they kind of have it right. Now, they'll have to go again, I think, so they've had 2 very good under-20 sides, but it's a long way away, like it's 3.5 years away, and we certainly, as far as Ireland is concerned, we can never again can we say, we're gearing towards, a 4-year cycle. Forget about it, lads. Just turn up 2 months before and take a chance. So, will he get all of those guys through? The age profile is pretty good, and I did like the look of Jalabert. But I mean, you could pick like Rata. So Penaud, I don't rate Penaud. I just think he makes too many mistakes, and I thought Teddy Thomas was just a disgrace the other day.
He's very loose.
He is. I mean, like, lads, here's my job description. Just give me the ball. I don't do anything else. I have no idea about defending. I don't know how to tackle, and I don't like the physical stuff either. So just give me the ball, and I'll do something great. And I'm a really selfish player as well. If there's guys outside me, I have the blinkers on, and I'm going to try something else. It'll be a low percentage play, and you can't have a guy like so. He's the if he plays on whatever it is, 3 weeks' time, Ireland have a chance. But they have so much quality. Going back to Rata, so they picked Rata instead of Penaud, and he's tiny. Now he's got great gas and whatever else, but where do they get him from?
These guys are everywhere there.
Yeah, but they must have 7 or 8 wingers. Like even. They're playing Gutien, the Toulouse centre. He's a winger, and they're playing him in the centre.
Yeah,
and
but even on the other Toulouse guy.
Why can't you pick your best wingers, lads? Why are you picking Teddy Thomas?
But even who's the Toulouse winger? Or the Toulouse centre playing the wing for them? Unbelievable player. He was brilliant on the weekend.
Fiku.
Yeah.
Like how good was he?
But
they just have so many good rugby players. I think is the point. Like it's like, and the depth is there. I think they do need to figure out who the guys are. Like I agree with you. I think there's a few guys there that you're saying, against New Zealand or against South Africa or against England in over in Twickenham or something like that. Are they going to be able to do it for you? Can you trust Teddy Thomas? I think they should be able to find someone that they can trust. I think there's enough quality there for them to do that. I also think it'll require some training. I think the real problem for France has been the training and having access to the guys. It looks like Laporte has probably addressed that. It looks like they've had a word with the clubs and they've said, listen guys, we can't have them. Like you're ruining your own assets here. If everyone agrees that, that they're all going to do this with their French players, they're going to give them the week off there, it'll benefit everyone here. They're not going to ruin your guys coming back to what is a really, really tough and long season. So they've addressed a few of those key little issues, and someone like Sean Edwards, with the amount of talent, as Neil said, just a few small things. It's all you need, tweaks. It takes on a completely different complexion, and I think that's what's happening in there at the moment. And the key part for them is now, can they build on that? Can they introduce a few, like 1 or 2 of these guys from the under-20s, who will be 23, 24 coming into that
Some
World Cup?
Yeah,
but can they introduce more of these guys in? Do they need to? They probably need. You probably have 1 or 2 outstanding guys who'll come through. But I think things look pretty good there at the moment. It's just whether it all blows up. They're capable of. That's the thing with France. That can happen so quickly over there.
But I mean, they've had some I mean, the calls. Who are the guys? Are the guys who are entrusted to deliver a coach knowledgeable enough and good enough? So some of the guys they picked as coaches over the last. It's all about the coaching. At this level of the game, it's all about coaching. All about coaching. And they have just about the right man because Galtier he's an icon, and they would respect him, and he's a strict enough guy apparently.
Okay.
So they've got the coaching ticket right, and they could pick 45 players and still get it right.
They have done in the past. That's the problem.
But that's the thing that you won't see 20 changes. Sort of so and motivation. I think they can. You can motivate, and this is, I mean, if this is Andy Farrell's, it's one of his key performance indicators as a coach. Motivating his players or intimidating them, whatever he has to do to get them right. But he didn't get it right. He didn't get it right on Sunday. And I don't know, pep talk. I don't know, was it Bono or Jedward?
He won't be invited back in anyway.
Just before we finish up, lads, the news today, Joey Carberry, another injury setback. He's obviously recovering from a wrist injury. He's had further surgery on that ankle issue that he picked up in the World Cup warm-up games, and then after the World Cup it sidelined him again. It's just, 18 months it'll probably be by the end of it, of just pretty much constant on the sidelines with various injuries. It's just, terrible for such a good player.
It's a shocker, and it seems like there's been a few bad decisions made. Particularly that one pre-World Cup looks like it was a mistake at this point, particularly when he has to go back in to get that ankle looked at again. He needs to be careful now. He's becoming a little bit like, it reminds me a little bit of myself, it becomes a real cycle for you because your body starts allowing for things when it has a problem. So he's, whatever his problem on his left or whatever it is, one ankle, it's obviously something that's been persistent, but the body starts over allowing for it on the other side. You end up coming up with other issues. So he needs to kind of introduce himself back in fairly gently, I think, and make sure that he's fully right when he comes back. There's a real lesson for that in him. I presume there was a bit of pressure. It sounds like there was probably a little bit of pressure to go to the World Cup, but I'm sure there was from himself as well. But you just have to listen to your body. Like, it's a long career, and look at the rest of his year now. It looks like it's been completely wrecked by one poor decision to go to the World Cup. So it's unfortunately it's a hard lesson to learn. And look, in saying all that, it could be wrong, but it just sounds like that's what's after happening. I'm not going to lie. That's what it looks like.
It's hard to turn down the chance to go to a World Cup.
I know, on one leg you'd go.
Yeah.
So
you have to be taken out of your hands, that decision, though.
Yeah. Well, no? I don't know. I think he would have been lost out there last Sunday. I think he would have just got blown away, even if he was kind of fully fit. And he's a lovely footballer, but that type of game there, he just would have been as lost. Maybe his execution would have been a little bit better than Johnny's. I think you're going to have to look outside him. And I don't know, I really like the look of Frawley.
Oh, so do I, yeah.
I really do.
Really good.
And I like Harry Byrne. And the kid is playing, Johnson, playing for the 20s. Now, they come and go, but just Frawley, I think you really, just mentally, I think he's strong, and physically he's strong, and he's clever too, and he has all the skills. And so if I was Andy Farrell and you're picking your team to go to Australia, you send Joey to a horse whisperer and off to that guy in Santry and the rehab guy. Don't know what his name is.
Andy King, he's not there anymore. But yeah, someone like him would be perfect for him. Yeah.
And then you pick. Okay, who do you want to be your out half for the World Cup? And that's how far ahead you got to think. And I just think Frawley, you can't leave him behind, and you got to make some really courageous left field decisions. And you just sort of say, okay, who's going to be my main man? Because I think Johnny was so far off kilter from everything. Do you remember the free play that they had? They had a penalty advantage, and he kicked it left to the left hand side of the field, and I went directly into touch, and he had Peter Mahoney chasing it.
Oh, yeah, I do remember that one, yeah.
And I think that's probably the worst play of Johnny's entire career there, and at a moment when they had he could do 12 things there, and he took something that wasn't even in the playbook.
What did you think of Ross Byrne? I thought Ross Byrne was pretty good when he came on. Yeah. I don't know whether that was the game it turned or not, but I like Ross Byrne. I really like him. I think the real problem with Frawley is going to be, where does he get the game time? That's going to be the problem. Like, where is he going to get game time?
Belfast.
Yeah, but like he could. That's where he could end up. But like, I don't know. Like, I think he looks like a smashing player to me. I'm always banging on about Frawley. I think he looks really, really good, and he's got a good head on his shoulders. And as Neil said, he's tough as well. He looks like he looks like he's the build of a. He doesn't quite hit like an international centre yet. He might be able to, but he hits well for a 10. I like the look of him, and he's a lovely player. Makes good decisions on the line. Now he probably needs to get exposed to playing against the top teams. But when's he going to do that? Like, when do we actually really see what his decision making is like with half a second less against a Saracens team or against a Toulouse team or one of the top sides, or against Munster even in Interpro? Like, we need to see him there, but I don't see where the opportunity comes. I don't know about you guys, but he looks like a guy who he's coming to an inflection point in his career, and he needs to make a decision about whether he thinks he's good enough to play at the top level. I certainly like the look of him. It's interesting to hear Neil say that as well. I think I say it every time I see him play.
But like Joey, so I think maybe even kind of fullback. I don't think.
You've been listening to the pod, have you?
Well, no, I wrote about this a couple of months ago, and I just think, it's just too congested, at out half, and he does wonderful things, but at the highest level, he's a Pro 14, and he's a Heineken Cup out half, and he's a lesser nation out half, but at the top level, which is England, France, New Zealand, South Africa, you need a big physical player, and maybe Joey's not that guy.
Well, I thought it sounds like Graham Henry made a call about him when he was 20, that he should be a 10, and everyone else just thought, oh well, if Graham Henry thinks it, that has to be true. Yeah. I've been saying it for years that his best position would be full back. I've been saying that for years. I just think he's a beautiful footballer, but it was too late nearly to make the transition in. He wasn't ever going to get the opportunity, so he spent 2 years sitting behind Johnny Sexton playing at 10 or at full back. They even picked Ross Byrne ahead of him in Leinster for a period there.
It's one of the things, and I know we're going on sort of a little bit, but just the kind of the full back, and Larmour wasn't just. It was just the sort of game that it was, and I don't think he's a footballer. I think he's a great stepper, and he's an athlete, and he's an instinctive player. But I just think in terms of football, and I think Joey's pretty.
I was ball handling, so like he would be a great link because you got two. Like, generally speaking, with Leinster or with Ireland, the two guys playing in there. They're not. I don't see any other distributor. So if you look at Ireland, you know that if Johnny Sexton's down, well, everything else is off Conor Murray. Like, it ain't going outside them.
No,
that's what I think. No. I always say they need to figure out who that third playmaker is. Like, I think Gary Ringrose is a superb runner. I think the next step in his game is whether he can release someone else. Can he release his fullback? Can he release his winger? That's the modern game. You need one other person to be able to do that. We know Bundy Akeen isn't going to do that. We know Robbie Henshaw probably isn't going to do that either. Both brilliant players, and you need someone like them in your back line. But that other person, you need someone else. It has to be either your 13 or your 15 that is that playmaker and that link. Otherwise, the pitch is pretty much 10 yards tighter because you can't get the ball over to the winger. And they can just hedge their bets all day. They can just keep coming off the line, pushing you backwards, because they know you can't get the ball there. And I even think as a kicking option, like having a 15 there who can really, can slide one in really well, can spot a gap, can kick it over the 15, can chip the ball into space for his winger, can grubber a nice one through. Like, we saw how well, I actually thought Jordan Larmour did it very well, and so did Conway against Wales. But something I've been saying this for a very long time. I think that there's a creative gap there, that teams that come up really hard against Irish teams, there's no one really there to fill the gap. I can see plenty of wingers. I just don't see the fullback that's going to be the link. I've been saying that for a very long time. So it's interesting to hear that. Like, I've said that for a long time about Joey. Unbelievable footballer. Like, you can see he's got all the talent. He can beat a guy if he needs to. He's got the change of pace, but the ball handling would be a differentiator for him. But look, he's made the decision, and now we're kind of sitting here wondering, like, what's next for Ireland? Like, how can they re-inject that kind of enthusiasm? How can they get the ball to all these exciting steppers, your Keith Earls, your Stockdales, your Jordan Larmers? Like, how do we unleash these guys? Because we know they'll cause trouble for any team they come up against. Problems are, can we get the ball? Can we get them going forward? But can we actually get the ball there once we go forward? So, lots of questions.
Yeah, lots of questions. We tried our best to answer them tonight. Neil, Luke, thanks so much for joining me.
Cheers.
And that's all we have time for this week on The Left Wing in association with Land Rover. We will be back next week with another podcast. And in the meantime, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, SoundCloud, or listen on independent.ie. So until next week, thank you for listening, and goodbye.
The Left Wing Podcast in association with Land Rover. Whether you're headed to a match or a weekend away, there's plenty of space for your team and their gear in the new Discovery Sport.